Hello there, my sleepy fellows. Our journey tonight will take us far beyond these gentle hills. Together, we will follow the steps of Gladriel, the daughter of Finarfin, once a princess of the Noldor, now a traveler of lands both fair and hidden. We will walk beside her into the heart of the Misty Mountains, into the stone halls of Khazad-dûm, where the fires of dwarven forges glow in the deep and ancient songs hum beneath the stone. Before we start, I would like to request all of you like this tale, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Let me know from where you are listening, and please share with your friends so that it reaches many more ears. Your small actions are kind gesture of your support, and it keep me motivated to produce more such stories. Let me softly unfold the heart of the tale we will follow tonight. A story of unexpected friendship, born beneath stone ceilings, forged in the warmth of flickering forge fires, and carried softly through the long years like a melody remembered in silence. This is the story of Galadriel, a name that carries with it the weight of both grace and memory. You may know her as the Lady of Light, keeper of Lothlorien's golden woods, or as the bearer of Nenya, the Ring of Water. But tonight, we journey to a much earlier time, when her footsteps were still fresh upon Middle-earth, when her heart was still searching for a place to call her own. And in that searching, her path led not only through forests and rivers, but deep beneath the earth, into the halls of Khazad-dûm, the great realm of Durin's folk. There, beneath mountains crowned with snow, Galadriel stood as a guest in a world far removed from her own, a world of stone and hammer, of craft and song, where the hearts of dwarves beat steady as anvils. This tale is not one of war, nor of great councils deciding the fate of realms. It is a quiet story, a tale of curiosity turning to respect, of differences bridged by understanding, and of an elf and dwarves finding common ground beneath mountains that remember all who walk within them. It is a story of shared wonder, for Galadriel, who had once stood beneath the two trees of Valinor, found herself marveling at the beauty wrought from stone and fire, shaped not by elven hands, but by those of the dwarves. And in return, the dwarves, who trusted few beyond their own kin, found themselves drawn to this Noldor princess, whose presence carried with it the ancient songs of the West and the soft wisdom of the earth itself. Now, close your eyes if you wish, and let us step quietly into the past, to the days when Galadriel first walked the halls of Khazad-dûm, and the first seeds of friendship were sown beneath the mountain stone. In the gentle hush of the early days of the Second Age, long before the golden woods of Lothlorien became her home, Galadriel walked as a wanderer across Middle-earth, her steps quiet upon paths few had ever known. She was not yet the Lady of Light draped in radiant majesty, but something softer, a seeker, a daughter of the Noldor, carrying the weight of her people's exile upon her heart, even as her eyes still held the soft shimmer of Valinor's light. Born in Aman, beneath the glow of the two trees, Galadriel had once stood among beauty so profound it could break the heart. Gold and silver mingling in the sky, flowers blooming beneath undying light, music that wove itself into the air like gentle perfume. This was the world that first shaped her spirit. But she was never one to simply inherit beauty. She wanted to shape beauty herself, to craft her own story upon lands untouched by her people's songs. That restless longing drew her across the sea, into exile alongside her kin, across the grinding ice, where the light of the trees was replaced by the pale glow of distant stars. And though the land of Middle-earth was often dark, shadowed by the weight of Morgoth's evil and the grief of fallen kingdoms, Gladriel found herself captivated by it, not because it was flawless like Valinor, but because it was wild and unfinished, full of secrets waiting to be uncovered, stories waiting to be told. It was during these wandering years that her path led her to Eregion, where the craft of the Noldor flourished beneath her cousin Celebrimbor's careful hands. Yet even among her own kin, Galadriel's heart was drawn further east, where the Misty Mountains stood tall and unmoving, their peaks crowned in snow, their hearts carved into halls by hands not of elves, but of dwarves. Galadriel had heard stories of Durin's folk, secretive, stubborn, proud, yet unmatched in their mastery over stone and metal, able to weave beauty not from light and song as elves did, but from fire and earth itself. Most of her kind saw little purpose in drawing close to the dwarves, for the children of Olé kept to themselves, wary of those who walked beneath the open sky. But Galadriel was ever curious, and she understood something many of her kin overlooked. Beauty comes in many forms, and understanding begins with listening. And so, with no banner at her back, no title upon her lips, she set out toward Khazad-dûm, the greatest of all dwarven halls, a guest seeking nothing more than to see with her own eyes, and perhaps to understand. What waited for her within the mountains of Durin was not simply craftsmanship or wealth, but a friendship she had not expected, one born not of treaties or need, but of curiosity, respect, and the quiet kindling of trust. Galadriel's journey toward Khazad-dûm began in the soft hush of early morning, when the mists still clung to the earth and the sky was washed pale with the gentle light before dawn. She walked with the steady grace of one who listens, her silver hair left uncovered, gleaming faintly, as if it carried the light of Telperion within it still. No escort followed her, no banners flew, for this was not a visit made in state or ceremony. It was simply Galadriel, curious and open-hearted, stepping into the unknown. The road led her eastward, out of Eregion, where the gentle forests thinned into stony hills, and the shadow of the Misty Mountains loomed ever larger before her. The air carried a faint scent of rain and earth, and beneath her feet, the ground hummed softly, as though the stones themselves remembered the steps of many who had walked this way before, elves, men, and dwarves alike. Galadriel found herself speaking softly to the earth, as her kind often did, not in command, but in gentle greeting, acknowledging the land as an old friend. The earth did not answer in words, of course, but in sensation, in the way the path seemed to guide her feet unerringly, even when no clear trail could be seen. The first hints of dwarven craft appeared not at the gates of Khazad-dûm, but miles before it, Small stones set deliberately along the path, each carved with a rune, their meaning lost to most who passed, but not to Gladriel. She knelt beside the first of them, tracing her fingers along the worn edges, feeling the memory pressed into the stone. "Welcome, traveler," the rune said, though no elf lord would have recognized such a message. As the path descended into the mountain's shadow, the air grew cooler, carrying with it the faint scent of forge smoke, even at this distance. Galadriel had long known the songs of her own people, songs of stars and seas, of memory and longing. But here, she sensed a different music, one born not of harps or flutes, but of hammer and chisel, of stone yielding to steady hands. It was near dusk when she reached the gates of Khazad-dûm, and there her steps faltered for the first time. The doors stood tall and gleaming, though no light touched them directly, for the dwarves had wrought them to catch starlight. Silver tracing intricate patterns of tree and mountain, root and river, all entwined in a language older than her own. The gates stood closed, and for a time Galadriel simply stood, her hand resting lightly upon the cool stone. There was no fear in her heart, only wonder, for here was a beauty utterly unlike the beauty of Valinor, a beauty shaped by hands that knew loss and toil, hands that shaped not for joy alone, but for survival, for memory, for kin yet unborn. She could have called out, as others might have done, but instead, Galadriel sang softly, a song not of the Noldor, but a song of greeting, the ancient welcome her people had once used when approaching the halls of Aula in Valinor. The sound drifted through the air, soft as mist, and though no one stood visibly at the gate, the earth itself seemed to listen. Moments passed, long enough for the sky to shift from pale gold to deepening dusk, and then the gates opened with a sound like distant thunder rolling through the stone. Galadriel stepped forward, and Khazad-dûm welcomed her. The halls of Durin's folk were unlike anything she had known. The elves built for beauty, their cities light and open, shaped to follow the curve of hill and tree, blending with the natural world around them. But the dwarves built with intention, every stone placed with purpose, each hall designed to endure. Here, beauty and function walked hand in hand, not lightness, but weight and strength, beauty that came from permanence, from holding against time itself. The air was warm with the breath of the forges, and Galadriel could hear the rhythmic clang of hammers, steady as a heartbeat beneath the earth. There were no songs sung aloud here, not as the elves sang, but the work itself was music, the shaping of stone and metal into forms both useful and fair. The dwarves who greeted her were wary at first. Elves and dwarves had never been quick to trust one another, for their hearts were shaped by different desires. Elves longed for beauty that mirrored the undying light they had left behind, while dwarves sought the beauty hidden within the earth, beauty that could only be earned by toil. But Galadriel did not come as a queen, nor as a guest demanding audience. She came as a listener, her curiosity soft and sincere, and in time, the dwarves began to trust her silence, for a guest who listens well is far rarer than one who speaks with clever words. They led her through halls carved into the heart of the mountain, past forges where mithril glowed like liquid moonlight, past statues of ancient kings, their faces worn smooth by time, until at last they came to a hall deep beneath the earth, where the ceiling was polished so finely it reflected the light of the forges like a sky filled with molten stars. There, Gladriel was offered a gift, not of gold or gem, but of story. The dwarves spoke of the heart of the mountain, of Durin's first awakening, when the father of their people opened his eyes beneath the earth and saw the stars reflected in stone. They spoke of the friendship once shared between elves and dwarves before pride and fear built walls between them. And they spoke of the hidden places where memory lay like ore within the rock, waiting for hands brave enough to uncover it. Galadriel listened to every word, committing each story to memory, not to hoard knowledge for herself, but because she understood. These stories were part of the land, and to walk this earth without knowing them would be to walk it blind. There was one story that caught her heart more than the rest, the tale of the nameless crown, a circlet of silver and sapphire shaped not by dwarven hands, but by the earth itself, long before either elf or dwarf set foot in these halls. It was said that this crown had been buried deep, hidden beneath stone and time, waiting not for a king, but for a keeper, one who understood that to rule is not to command, but to remember. Galadriel knew in that moment that her journey was only beginning, for the earth had called her here, not simply to learn, but to remember something she herself had forgotten, a promise made beneath stars long before Khazad-dûm was ever carved. What that promise was, she did not yet know. But the mountain remembered, and so too would she. Deep within Khazad-dûm, past halls carved with precision and pride, past the glowing veins of mithril that shimmered like starlight caught in stone, Galadriel walked with quiet steps, her silver hair a soft gleam in the dim torchlight. The warmth of the forges faded behind her, replaced by something older, deeper, a silence that hummed with memory. The dwarves had led her this far, but beyond this threshold, they would not follow. There were places in Khazad-dûm where even the most daring of Durin's folk tread lightly, for these were the halls where the bones of the world lay bare, where the earth spoke not with voice, but with weight and presence, with the slow, patient breathing of stone that had endured since the shaping of Arda itself. Galadriel did not hesitate. She placed her palm flat against the cold stone door, feeling its texture beneath her fingers, smooth in some places, worn down by time, but rough where the runes still clung to the surface like ancient scars. She could feel the pulse of the mountain, slow and deep, a rhythm not unlike her own heartbeat, though far older and steadier. The door swung inward without sound, and beyond it lay darkness, but not the darkness of fear or malice. This was a silence full of memory, a hush where even time itself seemed to pause and listen. The chamber was circular, its walls lined with veins of silver and black stone, a pattern that shimmered like moonlight on deep water. At its heart stood a pedestal, worn with age but still strong, and upon it rested something half hidden beneath the dust of centuries, a crown, not of gold or iron, but of woven silver, its slender band holding a single sapphire so clear it seemed to hold a piece of the sky. Gladriel approached with the slow grace of one approaching a memory long buried, each step drawing her deeper into something both ancient and familiar. When at last her fingers brushed the crown, the air shifted, and the memory held within it unfolded like a flower opening beneath starlight. She saw herself, not as she was now, but as she had been long before, a young Noldor princess standing beneath the light of the two trees, her hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes filled with the hunger for creation, for beauty she could shape with her own hands. It was then, beneath those trees, that she had crafted this crown, not for power, but for remembrance, a symbol of her vow to walk a path of her own making, to forge beauty in lands untamed, to weave her own story into the bones of Middle-earth. This was not a crown for ruling, nor a crown meant to be worn upon a throne. It was a crown of memory, shaped to hold her promise that she would never forget the light of Valinor, even when shadow crept across her path. But the vision did not end there. She saw herself, years later, standing upon the rocky shores where the grinding ice met Middle-earth, her hands trembling from cold and grief, her heart weighed down by the sorrow of exile. It was there she had set the crown aside, burying it beneath stone and time, believing herself unworthy to wear it after the doom of her people had fallen. "I will take it up again," she had whispered to the earth, "when I understand what it means to truly belong to this land." The earth had kept her vow, holding the crown beneath stone and silence, waiting, until now Galadriel stood still, the crown cradled in her hands, its weight far lighter than memory had made it. It was not a burden, but a gift returned, not because she had claimed it, but because she had earned the right to remember. And with the crown came understanding, not all at once, but gently, like dawn creeping across a dark sky. She saw herself not as a queen meant to rule, nor as an exile doomed to wander. She too was a keeper of memory, a bridge between the light she had left behind and the earth beneath her feet. She understood now why the dwarves had led her here, though they themselves did not know the fullness of it. They were the keepers of the earth's deep songs, the carvers of memory into stone, and it was only fitting that her crown, a crown of memory itself, should be returned to her by their hands. But there was more. As Galadriel stood in that quiet chamber, her hands tracing the silver band, the earth itself seemed to stir, not with words, but with a presence, a gentle awakening. From the walls, faint lines of light glimmered, tracing runes unseen for an age of the world, and though no voice spoke aloud, Galadriel understood the message written there. To remember is to belong is to bear the beauty and the sorrow alike. To walk with memory is to walk with both light and shadow. This is the crown you made, and this is the crown you must wear. She placed the crown upon her brow, and for a moment the chamber seemed to breathe with her, the stones around her echoing her own heartbeat, slow and calm. The sapphire glowed faintly, catching the starlight reflected through the veins of mithril, and in that light, Galadriel saw not just her own face, but the faces of all who had walked this path before her, elves, dwarves, even mortal men, each of them a keeper of some part of the earth's story. She understood then that her power, her purpose, was not in commanding others, nor in shaping kingdoms to her will, but in remembering, in holding the fragile light of memory safe against the winds of time, in walking with stories so that none would be lost. With the crown settled upon her brow, Galadriel turned and walked back toward the living halls of Khazad-dûm, her heart calm and sure. She would walk this path not alone, but with the memory of all who had come before, and the friendship of those whose hands shaped the world alongside her own. And the earth, in its own quiet way, breathed a sigh of relief, for at last, the memory it had held in silence could walk the world once more, carried upon the brow of the daughter who remembered. The dwarves saw the crown upon her head when she returned, and though they said nothing, their eyes shone with a quiet respect, for they too understood the weight of memory, and they knew they had not simply guided a guest, but returned something to its rightful keeper. Gladriel stood among them, no longer a wanderer seeking a place to belong, but a daughter of Middle-earth, bound to its earth and sky, its sorrow and beauty, its light and shadow. And the story she carried was no longer hers alone, but part of the land itself. Her path would lead her far beyond these halls, to forests and rivers, to golden woods and silver shores. But always, the memory of this night would walk with her, like a song sung softly beneath her breath. The crown of memory was hers once more, and with it, the promise to remember. She returned from the silent heart of Khazad-dûm, the silver crown resting lightly upon her brow once more, though it no longer felt like a burden. It was not a symbol of dominion or even exile now. It was a crown of memory, a piece of her story that had slept within the stone for centuries, waiting until she was ready to claim it, not with pride, but with the understanding. The dwarves, those hardy folk who rarely showed emotion to outsiders, watched her return with a quiet reverence, though no words were spoken. They saw the crown and understood, in their way, that this was not merely a relic of elven craft. It was something far older than the Second Age, something that belonged to the bones of the world itself, a memory the earth had held and now gently placed back into Galadriel's keeping. That night, they feasted together in a great hall carved beneath the living rock, its walls shimmering with inlaid veins of mithril and polished stone that caught the glow of countless lanterns. Dwarven voices filled the air, singing songs not of war or wealth, but of the earth itself, of the first awakening of Durin, of the shaping of the halls beneath the mountain, and of friendships long past, including those between elves and dwarves, before time and pride built walls between their peoples. Galadriel listened, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of a stone cup, the warmth of the hall seeping into her skin. The dwarves spoke not in elegant elven verse, but with the weight of stone itself, simple, solid words that held generations of meaning beneath their rough edges. As the night deepened, Galadriel herself was invited to speak, not out of obligation, but because they had seen in her not a queen come to demand, but a guest who listened. And so she spoke, softly, her voice like water running over smooth stones, weaving for them a story they had never heard, the story of the crown itself. She told them of the two trees, how their light had bathed Valinor in silver and gold. She spoke of the longing for creation that stirred in her heart even then, the need to shape something beautiful with her own hands, not out of duty, but out of love for the land itself. She told them how the crown was born, shaped not for a ruler, but for a keeper, a reminder that no light, not even the light of Valinor, should ever be forgotten. The dwarves listened in stillness, their cups paused in their hands, their eyes reflecting the soft shimmer of her words. When she fell silent, there were no cheers, no loud praise, only a deep, resonant hum, a sound the earth itself seemed to join, as if the mountain had known the story all along and was grateful to hear it told aloud once more. The days that followed were days of quiet companionship, of walking paths rarely shown to elven eyes, of sharing knowledge not from scrolls or tomes, but from calloused hands and quiet gestures. Gladriel learned the names of stones, not in elven poetry, but in the speech of the earth itself, the ancient words the dwarves used when carving through living rock, words that carried both respect and command. She watched as mithril was shaped, not into weapons or crowns, but into small, beautiful things, pendants shaped like leaves caught in mid-fall, cups whose rims glimmered like starlight on water, doorways carved with patterns that told stories in silence. The dwarves explained, in their simple and honest way, that beauty was not just for kings. Beauty was for any hand willing to shape it, for any heart willing to see it hidden in plain stone. In return, Gladriel shared something few dwarves had ever heard, the songs of the earth as the elves knew them, the quiet music they sang to trees and rivers, songs that did not shape or command, but simply accompanied the world in its own slow dance through time. It was a language the dwarves did not speak, but they listened, and in their silence, Gladriel felt their understanding, for though they did not sing to trees, they sang to stone, and stone, too, remembered. One evening, deep within the heart of the mountain, Gladriel was shown something even fewer outsiders had ever seen, the Chamber of First Light, a hall where the dwarves believed the very first rays of sun had once pierced the stone before the doors of Khazad-dûm were ever set. The chamber was carved into a perfect circle, its walls inlaid with stars of mithril, tracing the very constellations that had shown the night Durin awoke. At the center of the chamber lay a single polished stone, no larger than a hand, but its surface was so smooth it reflected Galadriel's face as clearly as still water. This, they told her, was the Heartstone, a piece of rock believed to have lain at the very spot where Durin first opened his eyes. It held no power, no enchantment, only the weight of memory itself, the first moment of awareness when a being opened its eyes and beheld the beauty of the world for the first time. Gladriel knelt beside it, resting her fingertips against its surface, and in that moment, she felt the weight of memory settle around her, not as a burden, but as a blessing. To remember, after all, is to love, to see not only what is, but all that has come before, to understand that beauty endures only because hands and hearts choose to carry it forward. That night, she and the dwarves shared stories like gifts, each tale a thread weaving together a cloth that had long been torn. The dwarves spoke of the first age, of elves and dwarves building together, of the gates of Menegroth shaped by dwarven hands to house an elven king. Gladriel, in turn, spoke of Allah, the maker of dwarves, and how the elves themselves had always felt a strange kinship with these children of stone, for though they were different, both peoples were makers, driven by the need to create beauty that would outlast themselves. By the time dawn touched the peaks of the Misty Mountains, a quiet bond had formed, not the bond of treaties or alliances, but something softer and more lasting. Gladriel was no queen demanding tribute, and the dwarves were not subjects seeking favor. They were keepers of stories, each in their own way, and in the sharing of those stories, they had found a common language. She knew her time in Khazad-dûm would not last forever. The world outside was calling, the forests, the rivers, the lands that still held shadows unchallenged. But as she stood at the great gates once more, looking out across the land she would soon walk again, she knew she would carry this place with her, the songs of stone, the weight of the heartstone, the warmth of hands that shaped beauty not for glory, but simply because beauty was worth the shaping. And upon her brow, the crown of memory gleamed softly, no longer the symbol of exile or loss, but of belonging to the earth, to the stories it holds, and to the unexpected friendships that shape us along the way. With a final bow of respect, Gladriel stepped once more into the light, her heart fuller, her path clearer, her story richer for all she had remembered. Galadriel stood at the eastern gate of Khazad-dûm, where soft dawn light pooled like gold across the stones. The crown of memory rested gently upon her brow, no longer a weight of history, but a quiet companion, a piece of herself returned. Behind her, the deep halls of Durin stretched endlessly, filled with the voices of stone, the hammer's song, and the ancient heartbeat of the earth itself. Before her, the world awaited, wide and open, full of paths yet walked and stories yet written. But there was one last step before she could leave the mountains behind, a final question lingering at the edge of memory, like a door left slightly ajar. The crown had returned to her hand, but why had the earth itself kept it safe beneath Khazad-dûm? Why here, of all places, far from the forests and seas that once called her name? She turned back one last time, her feet leading her down a path not marked on any map, a path shown to her in dreams and memory. The dwarves did not follow, for this place lay beyond even their lore, a secret the stone had kept even from Durin's folk. The path led her into the oldest part of the mountain, where walls were rough and unshaped, left as they were found when Durin first woke. Here, the air was still and cool, filled with the faint scent of earth long sealed away from sky and wind. The crown glimmered faintly, catching what little light filtered through narrow cracks overhead. At the heart of this hidden place lay a single ancient stone, smooth as river-worn glass, embedded in the earth itself. Upon its surface, carved so finely, the runes seemed that almost part of the rock's natural veins, were words in a tongue so old, even Gladriel had to pause to recall it. Remember what was promised, carry what was lost. Light returns only through those who remember the dark. She knelt beside the stone, fingertips tracing the runes, and as her touch met the earth, memory flooded back, not just her own, but the memory of the land itself. She saw the moment the crown was laid to rest, her own hands placing it there, trembling not with fear, but with a grief so deep it left no room for words. She had stood in this very chamber long before Khazad-dûm was built above it, long before the dwarves knew these halls existed. She had come alone, fresh from the long march across the grinding ice, her heart still raw from the loss of the two trees, the weight of her people's doom pressing hard upon her shoulders. In that moment, she had made a vow, not to Valinor, not to her kin, but to the land itself. She promised that if ever her heart grew so proud, so clouded, that she forgot the weight of memory, the weight of loss and love both, the earth could take the crown from her hands and keep it safe until she was ready to remember. The earth had held that promise. Through all the long centuries, through the rising of kingdoms and their fall, through the wars and wounds and slow healing of Middle-earth, the crown had slept beneath the stone, waiting for the day Gladriel would return, not as a queen seeking power, but as a daughter seeking memory. Tears pricked her eyes, not of sorrow, but of relief, the soft easing of a burden she hadn't known she carried until it was lifted. She had spent so long searching for a home, wandering forests and rivers, shaping realms with her hands, all the while forgetting that home was not a place, it was a promise kept. With both hands, she lifted the crown from her brow and placed it gently up in the stone, where it fit as if the earth itself had shaped it for this purpose. But this time, the crown did not vanish beneath the soil. It rested in plain sight, no longer hidden, for the memory had been reclaimed. The earth did not need to guard it any longer. She remembered now. As Gladriel rose, a faint breeze stirred the air, not of wind, for no wind could reach so deep beneath the mountain, but a breath of the earth itself, a sigh of release, as if the land, too, could finally rest. The crown remained, but its light no longer burned with the painful brilliance of loss. It glowed softly, like a memory fondly held, no longer feared. Galadriel knew she would walk forward without it upon her brow, but the memory it carried would walk with her, woven into her very bones. When she returned to the dwarves, her brow bare once more, they did not question it. They had seen enough to understand that this was no ordinary relic, no treasure to hoard or gift to pass. It belonged to the earth and to her, and in that understanding there was respect deeper than words. The next morning, Gladriel stood once more at the eastern gate, the sky wide and open before her. The dwarves gathered quietly to see her off, not as subjects sending away a queen, but as friends bidding farewell to a guest who had walked with open heart and open hands. Durin himself stood at the gate, his arms crossed, his eyes thoughtful. "You walk lighter now," he said gruffly, though there was kindness beneath the rough edges of his voice. Gladriel smiled, her hands resting gently at her sides. "I walk with memory beside me," she said, "and memory is lighter when it is shared." He nodded once, a solemn gesture, and then stepped aside. No ceremony, no fanfare, just the quiet understanding of two keepers of memory who had each found a piece of themselves in the other's story. As Gladriel descended the mountain path, The first rays of the sun caught her hair, turning it silver and gold, like a fleeting echo of the two trees. The world stretched before her, wide and waiting, and though her heart still carried longing, it was no longer the restless hunger to claim. It was the gentler longing to tend, to walk beside the world, not ahead of it. For she knew now that no crown, no kingdom, no realm could ever hold what truly mattered. It was not power that shaped the fate of Middle-earth, but memory, the stories kept, the promises held, the gentle hands that tended beauty, even when no one was watching. And so, my sleepy fellows, Gladriel walked on, not a queen crowned in power, but a daughter crowned in memory, her footsteps light upon the earth, for the earth itself remembered her vow. And somewhere beneath the mountains, where no light reached but memory still glowed, the crown rested quietly upon the stone, its sapphire gleaming like a star kept safe within the bones of the world. Her story would continue, as all stories do, but for now, the earth could rest, the memory reclaimed, the promise fulfilled.